I'm a misanthrope, yet I am utterly benevolent. I have more than one screw loose, yet I am super idealist who digests philosophy more efficiently than food. Who said these words? Well, it was none other than Alfred Nobel, the subject of this wonderful new book by my friend Unni Turrettini called Betraying the Nobel. And in this episode, you're going to hear about all sorts of amazing tidbits that you never knew about the Nobel Prize, the prize, as it was known, the Nobel Peace Prize, including why Donald Trump was a good selection, according to Unni, perhaps, and that one that Alfred himself may have condoned, if you will, if you can believe it. You'll also hear about why is the Nobel Peace Prize, which is a Swedish organization, Alfred Nobel was Swedish, why is it given out in Norway? That's kind of weird. It always perplexed me. And you'll also hear about what can be done to restore the Nobel Peace Prize to their former stature of glory, prestige, etc., that they had for many, many years. And some say the gold of the Nobel Peace Prize has become tarnished thanks to being awarded to individuals that we discuss in this episode. So for now, everything you've ever wanted to know about the Nobel Peace Prize coming up in Betraying the Nobel with none other than Unni Turrettini. Enjoy the episode.
Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
All the way from, are you in Oslo right now, Unni?
I'm in Oslo, Norway, absolutely.
The home of the Nobel Peace Prize. And she has written a phenomenal new book, a book that was a cri de coeur, a cry from the heart, as they say, that really just struck me so deeply and touched many nerves and in a good way. And I couldn't be more proud to become friendly with Unni as she's come to bring this book to the world that so desperately needs it. And the book is, of course, I'm only holding up my early version of it, but it's called Betraying the Nobel. And I want to welcome you, Unni, all the way from Norway. Thank you so much for joining us on the Into the Impossible podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Brian. It's an honor. And it's funny, you're holding up the previous cup. I don't even have that one yet.
Oh, you don't?
Yeah. So I have not seen or held my book in my
Wow.
hands.
I get mine tonight from Amazon. I'll get it in Kindle form first, and then I'll get it in physical copy. They assure me tomorrow, which is publication day, and it's published by Pegasus. And it's a beautifully written book. It's a very very quick read. I read it literally in under 2 or 3 hours, nonstop. Which is saying a lot for the pandemic podcasting that I'm doing. I'm trying to read a book every week or 2 weeks, and this one just kept me up. I couldn't stop reading it.
Oh, thank you, Brian. Thank you for that. Yeah,
it's so wonderful. So I want to talk to you first and foremost about what it's like to write a book like this and why you were inspired to do this. You are aware of my book, Losing the Nobel Prize, which is about science and kind of my personal experiences with the Nobel Prize and some of its shortcomings that myself and other members of the scientific community have highlighted to some avail, not necessarily no avail. But why did you, an author who had previously written about the lone wolf killer and has done so much in so many other fields, why did you write a book about the Nobel Prizes?
Yeah, it's a great question. I have, as a Norwegian myself, I've always been very proud and honored that my home country of Norway gives out the Nobel Peace Prize. And I thought, we were doing such a great job. And then in 2009, when they awarded Barack Obama, and before when he was nominated, he had been less than 2 weeks in office. And he had, given a lot of great speeches, but he hadn't really started doing any of the things that he said he would do. So obviously that prize was given for his potential as a leader and what he would do than for what he actually had done. And I thought that was curious. So that actually sparked an interest to dig deeper. And, you're asking my reason, I love research. So I'm curious as, in general about a lot of things. And my first book on the lone wolf killers is really about how our culture, how our communities contribute to someone's evolution into becoming a mass killer. And so I discovered that the Nobel Peace Prize is also a lot about culture, and who wins is a lot about the Norwegian culture and Norwegian politics. And what I found was that there's a committee of 5 people, and they are all politicians. Either now they're all former politicians. They're not active any longer, but they have given the honor to sit on the Nobel Peace Prize committee as a thank you for a long and loyal service to the 2 main political parties. So obviously then the decisions that they make, the selections that they make are political. And that's what I found. And that, really shocked me.
And when you approach a book like this, your previous book, you're not trained as a journalist. You were trained as a lawyer or to study law. Can you talk a little bit about your background and what makes you such a good storyteller?
Well, I'm not sure that I'm a good storyteller, but I studied law in 3 countries. I'm a lawyer in Norway, and then I also at the same time as I was finishing up my studies in Norway, I studied law in Paris, and so I have a law degree from France as well. And then I did a master's in law in Boston, in the United States, and took the New York bar exam. So I practiced as an attorney of law in a U.S. law firm in Paris back then, and I worked for some companies as an in-house lawyer as well, and in the finance industry. So I come from a very sort of legal corporate world, and that was never really a passion of mine. I mean, I did it as I thought that was, something that I was supposed to do. I mean, what I loved about my law studies, though, is that, I got to do a lot of research. I got to sort of explore my curiosity, why things work the way they do in society, and, all these things. But practicing corporate law was not really my passion. So, but I've always been a ferocious reader. I mean, like yourself, so I've always been very curious. So, from doing research and finding information, and then to writing this book, I mean, that was a longer process, so that was a learning curve for sure, and still is, so.
Well, you're definitely meticulous in your research, and when we chat more in the future, I'll ask you about that process as coming from a lawyer's perspective, because I think you bring some of that kind of cross-examination, that rigor, that mental, rational way of thinking that's really scientific about a Peace Prize, which is just phenomenal. I want to get controversial for a second. I read a quote from you in an august newspaper. Actually, I've just found out that it has the fourth highest circulation newspaper in the United States, and that's called the New York Post, from my hometown, New York. And the following quote comes from author Unni Turrettini. President Donald Trump is actually exactly what the Alfred Nobel wanted for his peace champions. Can you explain that to me? And was that taken out of context?
Absolutely. And when I last week, just a week ago, I was interviewed by the New York Post. I knew they wanted to do a feature of my book coming out, and especially because Trump has been nominated now 4 or 5 times for the Peace Prize next year. And he was nominated also in 2018, I believe. And so they wanted to talk about Trump and the Peace Prize, and, also, with the election coming up. And so I did not say at all that I thought he was a worthy peace champion. But he does fulfill, some of the criteria in Alfred Nobel's last will. So he has, through agreements and economic agreements and also other agreements, brought countries closer together. And so he has filled, and that he has done in the previous year. So there's a previous year criteria that actually the Nobel Committee doesn't usually look so much at. So he does, he definitely, he fulfills that criteria. He has done he has done some good things too. So I think it's fair to give credit where credit is due, right? But what I said to the journalist in the New York Post is that I don't believe that Alfred Nobel would have chosen a person like Donald Trump, not because he hasn't done some good things, but because his whole persona and rhetoric is more divisive than it is unifying. And I think we see that also, like within the United States, riots and protesting and things going on there, not only due to COVID, but just in a sort of a general sense of anger and distrust. And I'm not saying that this is all his fault. I think it's a long line of things that I think there's a long an ongoing. I think people voted for Trump because they lack trust in the political elite and in the leaders that we've had previously. So there's something that has to be done there, so that the general population feels that they have a chance at life, that they actually can get out of poverty, that they are given wages that you can live on, and so I think there's a lot of discontent underlying all of that creates this division as well, and also make people vote for someone like Donald Trump, who has a very splitting and divisive rhetoric. And Donald Trump also has created a lot of conflict with other countries, with China, with there are and also, I mean, I don't think there's one European government that is in favor of Donald Trump. They're all, he's a very sort of hated political figure in Europe. So I think he doesn't have that sort of unifying manner and way of being as Barack Obama had, but of course you can't give somebody the Nobel Peace Prize just by being a unifying person. You have to actually take some steps and do something too.
Right. And you point out in the article, or at least you're quoted in the article as speaking in favor of the fact that he did accomplish something that had been impossible for, decades, the Abraham Accords in the Middle East. Israel features very prominently in the book, which as a Jew, as someone with attachment to Israel, I found very fascinating. And I think you have a tremendous amount of courage to write a book like this. Here's what the cover will look like. So you haven't seen it, but I'll show it there. There's Betraying the Nobel. And it has a foreword by Professor Michael Nobel. And we both know there are these rumors that, Alfred Nobel, his wife, was seduced by a mathematician, and that's why there's no Nobel Prize in mathematics. That's, of course, nonsense. He wasn't even married, but he did have brothers, and his brothers had children and grandchildren, and they are still possessing the Nobel name. The question is, they do not seem to agree, except in the sciences mostly, with the direction that the Nobel Prize committees have taken their namesake prize. In other words, the Nobel Peace Prize in particular, and the Nobel Prize in economics, quote unquote, the Swedish Central Bank Prize in honor of Alfred Nobel, as it's technically known. They've been very outspoken about that. These would be his great nephews, I suppose. Talk to us about the foreword written by Professor Michael Nobel in your book. What is his attitude towards what the Nobel Prize has become, and how has it strayed from what his great uncle would have wanted?
Yeah, that's I've had a sort of a long friendship now with Michael Nobel, and I'm really honored to call him a friend. And he's helped me tremendously with my book, because when I brought my project to him and my research, and I wanted to know what he, as a member of the Nobel family, and also he has been quite outspoken about, in particular, the Peace Prize, and has written articles in Norwegian newspapers, and he's very. He really cares deeply for the cause of peace, and also for the legacy of his ancestors, of his great granduncle or something. How do you call it? He really cares about the legacy, and that Alfred Nobel really wanted to create a better world. That was his goal. So he wanted to, also all his inventions, Alfred Nobel, all his inventions were really for the betterment of the world. Dynamite, which was, is also dangerous and can be used for, lethal, means and war. But it was really meant to, for infrastructure, to, for, tunnels, building railroads, and it was. So it's, he really wanted to create just a better and easier world for people. And everywhere. So he wanted in Michael Nobel's view, and what I've, everything that I've read and understood, is that all his prizes, in the different, the science prizes as well. And we've spoken about this as well, Brian, that, we really believe that Alfred Nobel wanted to create a better world through all of his, and ultimately a more stable and peaceful world through all of his prizes. So yeah, and that also makes it so almost devastating and really sad that the Nobel Peace Prize committee will just, the 5 people will just sit there and just ignore Alfred Nobel's intentions and also legal document which states this, right? And they will just ignore it and just give it to people and causes that they deem are, oh, we believe this is a good cause and we'll call it peace this year,
Yeah, and Michael points out in the foreword to your lovely book, he points out, he says, this prize, the Peace Prize in particular, was called the prize. In fact, sometimes I'll give a talk and the host, of my talk, or perhaps I'll be on radio or something like that, and the host will call it, losing the Nobel Peace Prize. In other words, it's almost like the Nobel Peace Prize is the prize, as Michael states. Now, you're a lawyer, and I want you to turn your keen legal mind to the question of, if Alfred Nobel's ghost came to you and said, Unni, I need you to take a case. The Nobel Prize that I endowed to make the world a better place has gone to terrorists, has gone to warmongers, has gone to people that increased the number of standing armies on planet Earth. What would you do? Would you take that case, Unni?
I would. I definitely would. And because, he was very clear. It's not a detailed document, his last will, as you know, but there were some criteria there. And, Alfred Nobel, he wanted his, there were really 4 elements to his last will in regards to the Peace Prize. He wanted the winners to be champions of peace. He wanted them to work for brotherhood between nations, the abolition or reduction of armies, and to hold peace congresses. Peace congresses can be any sort of large, meeting, or, getting people, unifying people together, and, and when, and that is a legal document. A will, last will and testament is a legal document. So as an attorney, I would say, well, if you have a legal document that tells you that every year you give money to this cause, let's say to find a cure for cancer, right? Then you cannot give that money to allocate it for COVID, for example. You cannot, because it's supposed to go for cancer research. So unless there is no more cancer in this world, and then, with the foundation, you can agree on, okay, well, let's decide what we should give the money to then, next, because there's no more cancer. Then you can give it to fight COVID. But, that is what a legal document is. And so there is a responsibility that the Nobel Foundation has in Stockholm. They actually sit with the legal responsibility to supervise what the different Nobel committees do with the prize, and to sort of agree on it, like at least, at the very least, come up with a set of guidelines. Okay, what can we include in this price and what can we not include in this price? So there's definitely some issues of, is this really legal what they're doing?
So you take the case. That sounds good.
I would
Well,
definitely take the
he'd
case.
be in very good, competent legal hands with you at the helm. I want to talk now about the issue of nominations. So
Yeah.
I mentioned this in my book, Losing the Nobel Prize, but only in the context of why the secrecy period is so long for the physics prizes and the chemistry prizes, et cetera, that when I made a nomination in 2016, I was only told a few different things. One was that I couldn't nominate myself, so that reduced the number of deserving candidates from 1,000,000 to 999,999. But nevertheless, I wasn't really given that much guidance. In fact, when I received the letter inviting me to nominate, it basically said that it could be for something discovered or invented decades earlier, in contradistinction to what Alfred Nobel's will explicitly says in the previous year. It also said it could be given to multiple people, which he did not explicitly say in his last will. And then it said for the betterment of mankind, which is the kind of heterodox component of the Nobel Prize in physics that makes it kind of like the Nobel Peace Prize, in that it's attempting to make the world better, and in that sense imitate the Peace Prize. It's clear to me that the Peace Prize was closest to his heart. Now, given that, they don't really control, who nominates beyond a certain level. They can send it out to their networks and try to encourage perhaps specific fields. But the Nobel Peace Prize is open to anybody. Anybody could nominate the winners of the Peace Prize, as I understand it. It could have hundreds or thousands of winners. You talk in the book about a couple of egregious examples, not only of winners of the Nobel Peace Prize, ranging from terrorists like Arafat to other people, but also nominated parties like Hitler, Mussolini, and Stalin. Now, can we really blame the Peace Prize committees themselves for who gets nominated? Again, Trump was nominated. I'm no way comparing him to those horrible individuals, but the lot is made of, so-and-so is nominated for the prize in physics. We don't know who's nominated for the prize for 50 years, which is another story. But can we blame them for who gets nominated? It's not their fault.
No, well, absolutely. That's a great point. We cannot blame the committee for who gets nominated. What I do think would help restore trust in the Nobel, Peace Prize as an institution, as a beacon of hope, and inspiration for people, is if they would make the nomination process public. Why this secrecy? It's not compatible with our world that we have today. Maybe it was 100 years ago, but not anymore. So why just make it public, and also make it public who nominates and what their reasons were, so that we can actually, and then people could step up. Some people who know something about this candidate can step up and get to voice their opinion, so that the research, so we know that the committee actually does proper and gets all the information there is, right, about certain candidates. And this, I believe, would just make it easier for the committee, and also make it easier for us to understand, so this year I understand, because they only had to choose between sort of these 10 people that were actually really worthy candidates. So we kind of get it, like why they would pick, as it is today, we really don't know. And the only reason we know that Trump is nominated for next year is because the nominators have gone public and told the press, right? Otherwise we would know. So isn't that funny?
Yeah. No, that's true. And then I send you this document that says confidential across the top. And I'm like, well, not that many people read my book, so it's effectively confidential that I was a nominator. Why? Something I've always been curious about. Why is the Alfred Nobel was Swedish and with some Russian extraction? Why is the Peace Prize given out in Norway?
Yeah, it's the only one of his prizes that was given to Norway, and it's quite curious. We actually don't know why. So this, but what I've discussed this with sort of experts in history on, and also with Michael Nobel, and what the conclusion we come to is that it was really back then. Norway was part of Sweden. We were actually governed by Sweden. So Norway did not have its own military power. It was very it was the little brother with no power. So, and also the Norwegian government there was a government, but it was, ruled by the Swedish, king and government. They were, really, they showed a great interest in the sort of the costs, in peace. So they favored, they were one of the first, sort of governments to publicly favor arbitration as a means to resolve conflict between countries. They also gave money to peace congresses. So they were sort of it showed very early on an interest in the cause. And Sweden at the time was the most powerful of the Scandinavian countries, at least. So it was, sort of a little bit of a powerhouse, and with strong links to the French, kings, and sort of royalties, and they had very strong ties with European countries. So Norway was then the more of the innocent little brother, and we believe that Alfred Nobel wanted such a place to avoid, this whole thing becoming so political and part of a power struggle, right? So.
Yeah, that's interesting. Even the process itself of the Nobel Prize is political. Not only the prizes that get awarded or the selected parties who win it. Yeah, we think of Norway here in America as as Sweden's Canada. No, I'm just kidding. We're not.
No, but it's true. We do too.
So I want to ask you a question that I've often thought about. In physics, there have been multiple examples in chemistry of prize winners that did great harm by virtue of the fact that they had been written into the history books for all times as one of the 230 or so, mostly men. By that time, when I wrote my book, there was only 2 women. There had been only 2 women. The previous one, Maria Mayer, had won since 1963. Now, thankfully, after my book, they've doubled the number of female Nobel Prize winners. But it's such a small cohort, and there have been some horrible behavior, or some say, borderline unconscionable behavior by winners. I'm thinking of William Shockley, who invented the transistor, won the Nobel Prize for that in the 50s and 60s. And the question about his Nobel Prize getting revoked because he had advocated for essentially what we call eugenics has come up. Similarly, Jim Watson, a co-discoverer, along with Rosalind Franklin and others of the DNA double helix structure, has said some things that are quite offensive in many quarters. What do you make of the fact that there have been no Nobel Prizes revoked for physics prizes, at least? Has that ever happened in the Peace Prize? And would it be beneficial if they did revoke some of the past egregious sinners?
There have never been a prize that's been revoked by the Peace Prize Committee either. And I actually find that quite shocking because, of course, the committee cannot know what a candidate will turn into, right? After they've given someone the prize. I mean, they can always hope. But when the most egregious example that comes to mind is really the leader of Myanmar, Aung San Suu Kyi, who's really, allowing genocide to happen in her own country. And she was definitely a worthy winner back in 1991 when she was a political prisoner, and for the cause of democracy but all the things that she stood for back then has now, it's no longer valid because of the atrocities that are going on in her own country under her watch. So, and the fact that she's also having a trial for the International Court of Justice in The Hague, and it's ongoing. So she is probably going to go away for war crimes. And do we really want to have a war crime criminal as a Nobel Peace Prize laureate? I don't think so. And I don't think it's honoring other laureates. I don't think it's honoring Alfred Nobel's intentions either for the prize. So I think it would serve the committee and serve the Peace Prize to be able to revoke. And that's just their decision. They can absolutely, there's nothing saying that they cannot revoke it. So why won't they do it? You know?
Right.
It's very strange to me.
Exactly. I feel like it's the same reason they won't recognize people who clearly deserve the prize in physics, like Jocelyn Bell, for example. They could give her a Nobel Prize tomorrow, but they don't do it. And I speculate in my book because it's essentially the world's biggest monopoly of its kind, at least in physics. And I think in the Peace Prize, maybe even more so. But just as we can't blame them for who is nominated, we can blame them. The corollary is that we certainly can name them for not, or shame them or blame them for not revoking prizes that have been used to bolster the image of criminals in some cases, as you pointed out. And so I think it's not done. In other words, they don't do it at their peril.
Yes.
I believe. Yeah, in my book, I wrote about how the Pulitzer Prize used to be more prestigious in some sense than the Nobel Prizes, at least in literature, say. But now, of course, the opposite is true. And the question is, what can we do if it was given to you? Unni has the sole discretion over the next Peace Prize. Do you have a clear winner that you would recommend? Do you have a standard, a rubric? I mean, maybe it'd be helpful someday if you and we talk about what should be like the classification that allows a person to be selected as a laureate, and then what allows them to be revoked if they don't behave properly. But what would be sort of a good prize in your opinion, Unni?
So I think there are many people that would deserve the prize. I think in general, I think someone who perhaps is not already a state leader, somebody who doesn't have the platform to operate from and the financial means. So I think that it takes courage definitely to select someone who's maybe not as known, who's not a celebrity, because that's another thing too, Brian, is that, they love these celebrities. And when they are pushed, like when other celebrities and state leaders, they're pushing for a candidate, over time, the committee tends to sort of give in because, okay, look, we'll just give it to them, because they've been, harassing us for so long, about this prize. And I believe that that's not benefiting the prize and increasing trust either. So to have the courage to really select winners that are doing a lot and would definitely need the celebrity and the financial means and the platform that is given through the prize would be beneficial. So there's I think there just off the top of my head, there's actually a woman in the United States, and she's been a peace champion really for years. She's quite moderate, so she's not the taste of everyone. But her name is Cora Wise, and I believe she lives in New York. And she has, she was, one of the first, to really stand up against the Vietnam War back in those days. And she's just continued. And her whole sort of philosophy, and also teaching, she's been teaching in schools and teaching, students about, the sort of the foundations for peace, to create, for relationships to be the basis for communication and basis for negotiation, right, between people and countries. So she has done a great deal, and she's written books, and she's been nominated numerous times, and she's on the radar of the committee, but they've never given it to her. And I'm guessing it's because she doesn't serve any any political. She doesn't. She's not serving any sort of Norwegian foreign policy. They have nothing to gain from her, and she's not really a celebrity, and so there would be no sort of, and there's no controversy either, because she's pretty much only done good things, right? So,
Right.
But people like that, like normal, regular people who are making, these amazing efforts,
Yeah.
and can really do some good.
So I want to close with, because I know you got a very tight time schedule with the book coming out in just a few hours. What do you think the Nobel Prize matters to people? Why is it so sought after? The president of the United States, will tweet about this prize, and meanwhile, there's probably a lot of these people without platforms, or even those that have won the prize, that would gladly trade that prize for the power that a president wields. So why is that? Why is it so obsessed over, and why is it important? If you believe it still is important.
I believe it is important, especially today, seeing with I think our countries. I mean, not in my lifetime anyway, but I can't recall a time in recent history, where our world has been more divided. After World War II, obviously, we see these riots and discontent in general in our society, not only in the United States, but here too, and massive problems with immigration and what to do. And I believe the Peace Prize, it comes back to leadership, and for the Peace Prize to be what Alfred Nobel really wanted it to be a beacon of hope and inspiration to all of us, not only to leaders, but to all of us as individuals, to become the peace champions we can be in our own, worlds, in our own societies, in our families, in our, in our schools, and at our jobs. And so, but if we don't trust, if we don't have trust in the institution and in the committee making these good choices for us, of course, we don't trust the laureates either. We don't trust these winners, because but that person has done, that person has literally blood on their hands. And, how can we don't look up to these people anymore. And so, which is really sad. And I think it's, I think they if they could be brave enough to really choose leaders that are unifying, that stand for connection, unity, and peace. And, through, and the Science Prize is the same thing, right? Through innovative means, and science, and just, then at least there's hope that we can get back on track. And that's where I think the Peace Prize has a role to play, in giving us these role models that we can actually look up to when we don't necessarily have these role models in our governments and in our corporations, for that matter.
That's right.
So that's really where I think it's important to restore meaning, honor, and integrity, really.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah. I agree completely. I see Alfred Nobel as kind of this visionary genius who had all the right motivations, and yet would surely be turning in his grave, or ashes. I think he requested to be cremated. But I want to close, because you make him human in this book, with all these wonderful quotes, and he really comes across in a sort of a more tender light than I had ever really envisioned him. And so I credit you for turning me on to that perspective of him. And I want to begin with, or just end with, the quote that I'm going to start off, and I'm going to record an intro to it, but I'll record this later. But he said in the quote, you have a quote from him in every chapter. I love it. You say that he says, I am a misanthrope, and yet utterly benevolent, have more than one screw loose, yet I am super idealist, who digests philosophy more efficiently than food. I assume that if you and Alfred Nobel could get together, it would be a wonderful conversation. I would love to be a fly on the wall for that. But for now, I want to wish you the best of success with this wonderful book, Betraying the Nobel, which is really a cry for reformation, to use the prize's prestige while it still has it, to do good for the world as Alfred intended. So, Unni, I want to thank you so much. I'm looking forward to doing a few events with you coming up. I'll put those on my website and we'll tweet about them. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the ride. Congratulations on another spectacular book.
Thank you so much, Brian. It was wonderful to speak to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
If you enjoyed this episode of Into the Impossible with Professor Brian Keating, please subscribe, comment, share, and review. Watch on YouTube, listen on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, or Stitcher. We appreciate hearing from you and are always open to your suggestions for future episodes. For more information and to sign up for Professor Keating's mailing list, go to drbriankeating.com. That's drbriankeating.com. Follow Professor Keating on Medium and Twitter at Dr. Brian Keating, Dr. Brian Keating. For more information on the Clark Center, go to imagination.ucsd.edu. Into the Impossible is a production of the Arthur C. Clarke Center for Human Imagination at the University of California, San Diego, in the Division of Physical Sciences. Eric Veary, Director. Brian Keating, Co-Director. Produced by Brian Keating and Stuart Valco.